Hi, everyone, and welcome to Deep Geek Live. This is a live stream. We're going to be doing the next in a series of videos where I'm looking at the regions of Westeros. We did the North last time. This time we're going to be looking at the Riverlands, just trying to unpick it, trying to understand a little bit of the geopolitics, the characters, possibly where all of this is going in the future. But I just got some breaking news, or it's breaking news from me, that we have got rumours of some new Game of Thrones spin-off shows. Now, this is very early. This is not official, as in HBO and George R. R. Martin have declined to comment on it, but previously they've been very assiduous in rejecting ideas about what other projects might be on the go. But this comes from a few sources that are generally pretty reliable. Variety is one of them. Another one is James Hibbard from Entertainment Weekly, who had a lot of access when he wrote the book Fire Cannot Kill the Dragon. And this has also been picked up by Elio and Linda, who, for those who don't know, they are George R. R. Martin's memory when it comes to the world of Ice and Fire. In fact, they co-wrote The World of Ice and Fire with him. Now, I will give you the information I have. As I say, treat this with as big or small or a pinch of salt as you like. But if it's true, I am very excited, because the rumor is that HBO is in early development to adapt the Duncan Egg novellas. Now, that would be very exciting if that's true. I love those stories. I know lots of other people who do. The Variety, I'll just read what I've got from Variety. It says, the 1 hour show would be based on the series of fantasy novellas by George R. R. Martin, following the adventures of Sir Duncan the Tall and a young Aegon V, 90 years prior to the events of A Song of Ice and Fire. No writer or talent is currently attached to the project, but sources say it is a high priority for HBO as the premium cabler looks to build on the success of Game of Thrones. And then Entertainment Weekly followed this up by saying that's not all. HBO has been meeting with other top writers, pitching other ideas based on Martin's works. Among the ideas being contemplated is a prequel series based on Robert's Rebellion. Goes on to say, one of the writers is a name familiar to HBO genre fans, Bruno Heller, who created Rome, which was good. So that is all we have at the moment. It's come from not from HBO itself or George R. R. Martin, so we can't yet treat it as being absolutely true, but it does come from some otherwise quite reputable sources. So, as I say, treat it with as large a pinch of salt as you like. This, in any event, this is a long way down the road. If it is true, they haven't got anyone attached to it. They're nowhere near development. Early stages of development is just they're trying to get an idea pitched and attached to somebody who they think might be able to deliver it. So we wouldn't see anything, I would have thought, for 3 or 4 years at the very earliest, even if this is going to work. So House of the Dragon is what we're going to get next. That is going to be based on the Dance of the Dragons, and that is going to happen next year. They have confirmed that. They're in mid-development for that. I think they're looking presumably to be starting to film that perhaps in the summer. They've got writers, they've got showrunners, they've got a place where they're going to be filming it, they've got everything, a few actors attached to it now, so that is firmly in development. These are just ideas at the moment, but if so, they are, if they're true, they are very exciting ideas. So let me know in the chat if you've got any thoughts on that. I know I'm sure you do. Josiah M saying, appreciate you, no question, Dave. Well, thank you very much indeed. and I also had Chazaristic, thank you, saying first time contributing and being in the chat for the live stream. Well, welcome. It's fantastic for you to have you here. And just want to say, Robert, you and everything you do is 11 out of 10. Oh, that's very kind of you. And chat is elite. Thanks. I absolutely agree with that. With the chat, it's fantastic. Fantastic group of people in here. It's a very different experience watching live and taking part in the chat from watching it a bit later. Right, so that's the potentially exciting news to kick us off. Today, however, we can talk about that in a bit if you're interested. But today, the main point of this live stream is to be talking about the Riverlands. Now, the Riverlands are they're at the heart of this story in a way that we often don't think of, because we think of this being about the Starks in the north and King's Landing and the Targaryens and the Lannisters. But the Riverlands is the heartbeat of this story, and it has been right from the Pact all the way through to this is where the Battle of the Trident, where Rhaegar died. This is where they're in at the crossroads is, which is a hugely underappreciated place that George R. R. Martin uses as a literal crossroads point for many characters and decisions. That area around Harrenhal, around the Isle of Faces, around the Trident, Ruby Ford of the Trident, in at the crossroads, that is so often being the hub of this story. So we're looking around that area as well as further north into the Riverlands, which extends obviously up through to areas around River Run. The Trident, incidentally, for those who don't know, there's a huge river and 3 big rivers all flow into it. And those are the rivers that you get, that one goes up through River Run, and then another one is the one that if you follow it all the way up north, goes roughly alongside the King's Road, and you get the twins up there with House Frey, and that's where they got their power from, was having the bridge over the river. So that is why it's the Riverlands, and that is the basic geography. This is low-lying land between hills to the left, hills to the right, and then further south also the hills start turning to the mountains further south, and then to the north you get the really kind of the swampy marshlands there of the neck. So it is at the center of all this story, and if you're trying to get from most parts of the Seven Kingdoms to other parts of the Seven Kingdoms, you will pass through the Riverlands. And so it's not surprising that a large part of the story that we read is based in the Riverlands, people moving through it one way or the other, as well as that being a hub for the story itself. So that's what we're looking at. Ryan Larkin, thank you so much for the super sticker before we went live. And Mara Lee, thank you for the super chat as well, saying just a show of love, appreciation and support from this nurse and patron to you. Thank you so much for all the fabulous content, stories and merch. You are the best. Mara, far be it from me to contradict you, but I think I would speak for many people in saying, no, you are definitely the best. Thank you, Mara, for all of your support and care. Let's, as I do all the time, I'm going to be framing this around questions I get from my patrons. I will pick up as much as I can from the chat as we're going through. But first question from my, or it's not really a question, a comment really, from one of my patrons, Henry Fairbairn, saying, the Riverlands is a bit like Europe in the game Risk. It's where most of the action happens, and it's very hard to keep control of, at least in wartime. Yes, I can see exactly where you're coming from with that. The Riverlands history is long and very, very complicated. We had, if you go back to sort of the Age of Heroes, and even before that, you had the era of petty kings and small shifting kingdoms, which were across huge swathes of the Westeros. But what you find in a lot of other areas is that eventually a particular strong family comes and pushes out the others and claims control, or one or two large strong families. That happens in the north with the Starks. That happens down with in the Iron Islands effectively get taken over by one culture and then stay with that one culture. You see that with the Lannisters being the kings of the Rock, and so on. You get the powerful families taking and keeping control in their area, whereas in the Riverlands, over a huge amount of time, this shifts again and again and again, and different people have control of different areas. So it is very hard to pick out who the main house is in the Riverlands, for example. Yes, we have got the Lords Paramount being House Tully, but they're not the oldest, they're not the richest, they're not the one that can produce the biggest army, they're perhaps not the most valid and recognized amongst an honored house amongst all the houses of Riverlands, but they just happen to be in the right place at the right time. So it's the Riverlands is very complicated, and that plays into the story we have now in A Song of Ice and Fire. It is the place of huge amounts of battles because it's the simplest and easiest place for all the forces to be meeting. It's largely flat, and rather than mountainous areas, which are around a lot of it, and a lot of the edges of Westeros. So this is where a lot of the big battles happen. And so, yes, people do not keep hold of it for very long. Connor Walsh, thank you for the super chat, saying, hi Robert, in Jaime's POV there is a focus on his left hand and subsequently how much he is struggling. Will we get a Jaime combat perspective? Yes, I think we will. So Jaime's lost his hand, his sword fighting hand, and so he spends a lot of his time, he brings Ilyn Payne on the show it was Bronn, but in the books he brought Ilyn Payne with him, who he could spar with and try and get good at fighting with his wrong hand, with his left hand. The thinking there, incidentally, was that Ilyn Payne can't speak because he has no tongue, and he also can't write, so he can't communicate to people quite how bad Jaime is to start with. Jaime is still, to a degree, caring about appearances here. But yes, we get this focus again and again and again on his ability to fight with his left hand, and this is central to his character because of the fact that that was how he identified himself, as being a great fighter. That was the key to a lot of his personality and self-understanding. So when that got taken away, then he does have to reassess who he is. And what he is doing when he gets Ilyn Payne is he is trying to rebuild the person that he was. So what I think actually we're going to be seeing is that, yes, he probably will still try and get good at fighting with his left hand because that's a sensible thing to do. But we will see him gravitate away from that. He's already obviously left Ilyn Payne in the books, gravitate away from that to a point where he starts to realize that he can be a human being. He can be a man without being this great fighter that he thought he would before. Probably as a part of that, I think you're right, we will at some point see him fight someone. So with his left hand, and I think that will show him that he isn't and can perhaps never be as good as he once was. So that, I think, will be again another step in his journey towards understanding who he is. And Dolores saying, Why did Illyrio give the eggs to Danny? Sorry, off topic. Yes, it's a little bit obviously looking at the Riverlands, but I can happily, thank you for the super chat, happily very quickly answer that one. The point was that the dragon eggs are symbols of Targaryen rule. Now, the plan from relatively early on is to get the Targaryens back onto power, or through Fagon. Danny can marry Fagon, and that then means that they can there are 3 Targaryens they are claiming, being Fagon, Viserys, and Danny. That means 3 dragon eggs, and this all works out well, and everyone can have a dragon egg, and then this is a symbol of power. That's the whole idea, is that you have a symbol of power. I suspect also, I won't go into the detail of this one, but I suspect also he has got Blackfire, the sword, hidden away somewhere that he's going to be giving Aegon at some point, again, as a symbol of Targaryen authority. Deborah Pollard, thank you so much for the super chat. I didn't see a question attached to that. If you do have one, please do let or just put it in the chat, and one of the moderators hopefully will be able to pick that out. Michael A, thank you, saying, hello, Robert. Do you think that the green men on the Isle of Faces are inspired by the ancient Druids and their sacred oak groves on the island of Anglesey off the coast of Wales? Love your channel. Well, thank you very much. So Anglesey, for those who don't know, it is, if you can imagine Wales, just at the northwest coast of Wales is an island called Anglesey. I don't think it's specifically, I might be wrong on this one, I don't think it's specifically inspired by that, but the idea of the Druids is definitely part of this, kind of the people tending the trees and nature and nature magic and things like that is definitely part of the inspiration of this. As I say, yes, Anglesey has got a particular tradition in that, but it's not... there are always people who know more about these things than me in the chat, but it is not unique to Anglesey. I think Anglesey has got its own version, sort of angles on it, perhaps. Anglesey, well, but the Druidic tradition is not unique to there. So I don't think it's specific to that, but definitely this idea of the people who tend the trees, which is what the Green Men were set up to do, to look after the last remaining weirwood trees in the south, effectively, and the Isle of Faces. So that is what their role is. Now, I think that this kind of image of and indeed sort of the Green Men also kind of fits in with Arthurian legend. If you go back a long way in Arthurian legend, when you get Herne the Hunter, I think it was, this kind of figure, this come from ancient English mythology, perhaps even further than that, that comes with sort of antlers and things like that as the symbolism. That, for me, works well being mapped across to the Green Men, who people... legend has all kinds of ideas about what they look like. Maybe they too have antlers, is what some people suggest. I am Dark Sister. Thank you very much for the super chat. Again, I didn't see a question attached to that one, but if you have one, you just say underneath saying, hey, Robert, I love listening to you. You're my fave. Thank you very much. The Blackfish is one of my favorite characters. Where do you think he is? And do you think he rescues Sansa and Edmure? I've got a few questions on him in the Blackfish in a moment from my patrons, so I shall pick up on this in more detail there. But specifically on where he is right now, so he has escaped from Riverrun, swam out under, they lifted one of the gates just a little bit, he swam out under it. Where is he now? Well, I think there are 2 big options, one of which he could go all the way across to the Eyrie, to the Vale, where he'd been for a long time, and maybe there are still some people there who feel they owe him some allegiance, or he could stick around in the Riverlands. My instinct is that he is sticking around in the Riverlands. I'll sort of unpack a few of the reasons for that in a bit, but the main thing is that he left the Vale because he said he is a Tully. I mean, he went off to the Vale, yes, but fundamentally, and took up a position there, but fundamentally he is a Tully, and that's why he came back, because of his family honor. And so I don't think suddenly he will abandon that. He, as part of his family honor, he did not wish to leave Riverrun. He held on to it for as long as he absolutely possibly could, until the point at which the Edmure basically told him not to, and he had to. Family honor then said that he had to do what Edmure, who was his liege lord effectively at the time, what he had to do. So I think he will want to retake Riverrun, and I think that is his aim. And the question is, how is he going to do that? So that's what he's up to. Do I think that he's going to rescue Sansa and Edmure? Sansa, I suspect not. Edmure is a definite possibility. I think he could do that. Chrissy Volstones, thank you for picking out. I just answered that one. Did I have any more questions to pick up in the chat? I think Fletcher Reed, thank you very much. How did the Tullys become Lords Paramount in the Seven Kingdoms? Right, this is a good question. This goes back to the burning of Harrenhal. The Targaryens invaded, and at the time, I've said that the Riverlands has been carved up in many different ways at many different times. At the time, the kingdom was actually the kingdom of the Isles and the Rivers. This was the Harren the Black, who was there. He was actually an Iron Islander, and so his kingdom was the Iron Islands and parts of the Riverlands. And it was him who built Harrenhal. And then when you get the Aegon coming to attack Harrenhal, obviously Harren said, okay, then all my followers come here and we'll take on these Targaryens. And the first noble family, significant noble family, to suddenly turn around and say, nope, we're going to be on the Targaryen side, was House Tully. And in recognition of that, Aegon Targaryen made them Lords Paramount. There were other houses which were older, nobler, richer, and all the rest of it, but what Aegon fundamentally needed more than anything else was people that he knew he could trust, people who had proven that they were on his side, and they could prove that they were on his side by either bending the knee, as the Starks did, for example, or by proactively turning to be on his side. And that's what House Tully did, was they saw which way the wind was blowing and they got on the side of the Targaryens, which was, let's face it, a very sensible move. Christopher Oldstein, thank you for picking up Deborah Pollard's question. Deborah saying, just wanted to say that I'm a long-time listener and wanted to show my appreciation for all of your hard work. Thank you so much, Robert. You always brighten my day. Well, thank you. That's a really kind message. So thank you very much indeed. Let's see, was there another one? Oh, here we go. Ghoul City, thank you, saying, love the Riverlands and Robb Stark. The young wolf is on a roll. I don't think anything can stop him. Yeah, go, Robb Stark. He's unstoppable, as you say. Where was I? I've got question from. Let's go to some questions from my patrons now. Afronaut Rose saying, greetings, Jedi Master Robert. which is a fantastic title. I'll happily accept that one. Thank you. From the land of Florida, I'm working museum archives of anthropologist and folklorist Zora Neale Hurston today, while listening to your Traveller's Guide series for the umpteenth time. I love hearing what people are doing while they're listening to this. That sounds excellent. I'm not a particularly au fait with Zora Neale Hurston, but that sounds fascinating stuff. Folklorist and anthropologist sounds excellent. So I was under the impression that Riverlands are not wealthy or politically weighty, as some of the other kingdoms in other regions in the Seven Kingdoms. The magic seems to be more powerful in this Middle Kingdom than in places like the Reach or Dawn. Can you please break down the significance of the Riverlands as it relates to magic, Westerosi geopolitics, and industry? Okay, so I've sort of unpicked some of this already. The significance of it in terms of geopolitics is because it is in the middle, and that sounds a bit simplistic, but often with geopolitics these things are quite simplistic. Is that it is, if you are trying to go anywhere, then you are largely going through the Riverlands, and so that is why so much happens there. Also, when you say it's not sort of as rich as the other regions, well, it doesn't have the Reach is definitely the richest, the lushest land. There's a part of the Vale, the actual Vale itself, wherein most of it is mountainous, but there's a Vale which is incredibly lush and rich. Obviously, the Westlands, House Lannister's got all of its gold, but after those kinds of things, actually the Riverlands has got some quite rich lands. They're very fertile, they're low-lying with all the rivers and all the rest of it, and so they are quite rich lands, which is part of why people have been quarreling over them for so long. But because of all this sort of quarreling and fighting and changing situation all the time, there's never been this kind of strong central house which has been able to grow up to both sort of support and champion the region. So that's not ever really happened. So it doesn't have as clear an identity as the North or Dawn or somewhere like that. So it's also over time has again geographically where it is has meant that it's got lots of different groups going on. It have the First Men, and then the Andals came in. Then you get a lot of people died in the Riverlands, and the Northmen came down and intermarried with them just after the Dance of the Dragons. It's a very complicated sort of picture, a patchwork really, that's going on in there. In terms of, you said industry. Industry is an interesting word when you come to Westeros, because industry, as we think of it, doesn't really exist. Certainly not in terms of heavy industry, but in terms of sort of agricultural produce and then other production of other goods, then yes, we don't hear anything specific about it very, very good. Also, nothing specific about it very, very bad. So it's sort of somewhere in the middle when it comes to that. In terms of magic, the thing that is at the center of all of this is the Isle of Faces, which is, and we'll talk about the Isle of Faces in a moment, but it's the central magical hub of Westeros, would be probably the way I would talk about it. The Weirwood network seems to be the main hub, the main base of the Weirwood network, and that permeates out through the Weirwood network to wherever else the Weirwood trees are. And although we think of there being no more Weirwood trees in the south, obviously there are some dotted about in noble houses and noble castles and all the rest of it. And there is this sort of arc. If you look on the map, there's a sort of an arc of places in the Riverlands that are still quite old godsy. you get Old Stones, for example. We get Raventree Hall with House Blackwood. We get High Heart, and we get the Isle of Faces. And there is this very strong kind of magic-y feel that passes through that area. Question from... I think I did have one. Here we go. So I'm Toxic X. Thank you very much. Saying, do you think Rob would have been stopped if not for the Red Wedding? He actually seemed to be on a legit roll there. Also, thanks for the great content as always. Thank you. I think at some point, one of the many, I have so many ideas for video series. One of the video series I would love to do at some point is just a breakdown of the War of the Five Kings. And I don't know if you've seen, I did some breakdowns of the War of the Ring in what was actually happening in the wars in the background of the Lord of the Rings, which was really good fun to go into. At some point, I'd love to do a series breaking down the War of the Five Kings, because when you actually start seeing it mapped out what was going on, it's fascinating. He was winning lots of battles. Tywin had it right. He was winning lots of battles, but he was sort of losing the war. Is that he kept on... he had a few big significant victories like Whispering Wood, for example, and he was pulling in a lot of support from around the place. But the war was not just about winning the battles. This was about gaining the political support. And so that was what was... Tywin was deliberately, in a way, using... what he was doing was using the mountain and not just the mountain and all his lot, but also spreading dissension to try and scorch the earth around the Riverlands to make it a lot harder for Robb Stark. And also Tywin could at any given time pull his forces back, just hold the place in the Westerlands, which would be incredibly hard for the Starks to actually take, because they are very mountainous, and Castle Rock itself is an incredibly strong fortress because it is literally inside a rock. So all of that is a sort of a slightly roundabout way of saying yes, he could have done if he'd had some strategic advice, not just about how to win battles, which he seemed to have sorted, but what was the way to influence the wider political situation. That was the big downfall that he had. And but for the Red Wedding, yes, he would have probably have carried on winning battles all over the place, but I suspect that Tywin in the long run would probably still have had his way through politics, not just open warfare. I think he realized in open warfare he wasn't winning this one, but I think Tywin would have probably outmaneuvered him in the long run. Tywin was... House Lannister was never looking like they were losing it. That's the point. I think the takeaway point is that you never looked at it and think, yeah, they've gone. Robb Stark's got them on the run. Question from... I think I had... Oh, here we go. Eric Fugg. Oh, hi, Eric. I've got some questions from you in the from Patreon, which I shall pick up in a bit. But thank you so much for the super chat. What do you think Harren the Black would have done after completing his castle had either the Targs not invaded or been defeated? Well, I think probably he would have started by consolidating for a while, because that took a huge amount of effort to build his castle. And once he's got his castle, then probably he would have expanded out. This is what the Ironborn do. He would have expanded out a little bit further. He was actually starting to... I mean, he wasn't an old man, but he wasn't a young man either by that point. So he didn't have huge amounts of time left. So I imagine that once he's established Harrenhal, it will take a little while to get that properly working as a castle, even once it's fully built, to get it properly working as a castle because it was so huge, then I think he would probably have expanded out into more of the Riverlands and further afield to just try and expand his influence even more. There were ongoing tensions heading down towards the Stormlands, so perhaps that's where he would have headed after that. I don't, in terms of the Targaryens not invading, absolutely. I think the Targaryens being defeated in any event, if the Targaryens would have had to have attacked, and they had a habit of burning down castles. So I think in any event, if the Targaryens attacked, Harrenhal, given its situation, given how big it was always going to be melted by the Targaryens. Denzel Podissamy, thank you so much, saying hello and thank you for your work. You are very welcome. How do you think House Frey will be standing by the end of the books? Yeah, I've got a few questions from my patrons as well. The short answer is I don't think it will be, but there will be. There are so many members of House Frey. They're all over the place. That I came just preparing for this. I came across a quote. I can't remember who said it, but that Walder Frey is the only lord who can field an army from his breeches alone. There are dozens of Freys, children of his, all over the place. And grandchildren. It's just we will not be able to root out all of House Frey. I shouldn't have thought. So there will be some left, but in any event, they will not be allowed to stay in power because the Starks and their allies have just got it in for them. So they are not going to survive. Okay, let's quickly go across to a question from Fedra the Beloved, saying, hey, Robert, long time no see. Great to see you too. I hope all is well. Any other question that's been on my mind, though unrelated to the Riverlands specifically? Dawn 1, Highgarden 2, Stormlands 3, the West 4, the Eyrie 5, Iron Island 6, Riverlands 7, the North 8. Why are they called the Seven Kingdoms? This is a good question, and it's a question that gets asked quite a bit. So I'll try and give the best answer that I can. Seven Kingdoms is the name. This is a historical thing. Seven Kingdoms is the name that the Westeros had at the time of the Targaryen invasion. That's the simplest way of saying it. And because there were seven kingdoms, there were obviously the North and the Vale, and as there was the Isles and the rivers and all the rest of it. So the seven kingdoms were there to start with. And so Aegon says, I'm going to invade the seven kingdoms. Now, where there are now, you counted that out, I think there's actually technically 9, the North, Riverlands, the Vale, Iron Islands, Westlands, the Reach, Dawn, Stormlands, and Crownlands. That's 9. So there are technically 9 now, but they are not 9 kingdoms because obviously the Targaryens couldn't allow kingdoms to remain. The fact that Dawn still has princes and princesses is because they survived for so long, and this was part of the deal, was that they could, when they did join up, that they could retain their own royalty. So, but all the kings that were there that were not deposed, like the kings of Winter in the north, had to accept that they were no longer kings. So the actual 7 kingdoms were defeated by the Targaryens, but they retained the name because that's what people called the Westeros. Question from Sylvester Snow. What is the history of the Isle of Faces? What do we know about it, and who has been there? Okay, so the Isle of Faces we know a lot less than we would like, is the short answer. The Isle of Faces is an incredibly mysterious place. It is an island. It is in the middle of the God's Eye Lake. It is a significant sized island. The God's Eye Lake itself, I hope I'm not making this up too much, I think it's something like 100 miles across. And the Isle of Faces is a significant island in the middle of that. So we're not told exactly how big it is, but it has been there in this kind of situation. There's not been any geographical movement or anything like that. It's been there for as long as that the Hammer of the Waters, the first Hammer of the Waters, was cast, sundering the land bridge between Dawn and Essos. Then the first time it was really, we know something happened there, was the Pact. The Pact was the thing which ended the Dawn Age and brought about the Age of Heroes. This was the end of the war between the Children of the Forest and the First Men. They signed the Pact at the Isle of Faces. Now, then we get a few curious details. In order to witness this, then the children carved faces on the weirwoods, all the weirwoods that were on the Isle of Faces, and hence it became known as the Isle of Faces. That's where that comes from, and also where this tradition of carving faces on the weirwood trees comes from. So that's there. Then we get told that in order to, because most of the weirwood trees in the south of the neck had been cut down by this point, the Isle of Faces had the highest concentration of them left, and was clearly very important and was hallowed as a place. They established the Green Men, which is this order of beings who were there to protect the Isle of Faces, specifically to be tending and protecting the weirwood trees there. Then it all goes quiet. Going through history, we don't really hear about it all that much, other than the fact that people do not go there. Whenever people try to sail there, then mysterious winds sort of push them back off course, or perhaps if they get too close, a whole flock of birds comes in and attacks them. You can't get there. And over time, people just sort of they didn't bother, because why would you? There's so much other land around the outside. You don't need to go to that one island. And so legends grew up, and people just didn't know what was on there. They just had to believe the legends of the Green Men. We know of two named people who have been to the we read about in Fire and Blood, which was this guy called Adam Velaryon. He flew there on his dragon. He was one of the dragon seeds who the blacks had got, people who they thought had Valyrian heritage, that they weren't natural Targaryens, so to speak, but they thought that they might be able to bond with dragons. One of these was Adam Velaryon, who was probably the bastard son of Corlys Velaryon. He flew his dragon and landed on the Isle of Faces. We're not told much about it, other than he consulted the Green Men and then flew off, and then died. Of course he died. So we don't know what he talked about, what he found, what he saw. We don't know anything, which is intriguing, of course. And then the second person we know about who went there is Howland Reed. Howland Reed paddled his way down the river, all the way from the neck, made his way into the God's Eye Lake to the Isle of Faces, and he spent the winter there, which probably, this is the winter leading up to the year of the full spring, probably meant he was there for 2 or 3 years, actually. Again, we don't know what he was doing there, but he was being taught, apparently. And then he left. When the full spring happened, he then left and went over to Harrenhal, which is on the north coast of the God's Eye Lake. So he left the heart of the Weirwood network to go to Harrenhal, and that is where all of this kicked off. So the link is very, very clear. So that's that's what we know about the Isle of Faces, and it has not appeared in this story. It is mentioned in a few times if you go through A Song of Ice and Fire, specifically 2 or 3 times early on in book 1, which is really interesting, in lists of places, magnificent places in the Seven Kingdoms that Daenerys is told about, or you get talk of it. I think Catelyn talks about it, in fact. So you get a few of these mentions, which is clearly George R. R. Martin teeing this up to be important later on. But he then has admitted in a few Q&A events that because the books stretched out a bit, it wasn't going to be the payoff in 2 books' time. It was going to be the payoff a lot later. So the Isle of Faces will come to the fore later on in the story, but not yet. And that is why he set it up, and that is why he then went quiet about it for a little while. Question from Drew says, George R. R. Martin says there will be a twist involving a character that was killed in the show. Could this be a potentially pregnant Jane Westerling, or is Lady Stoneheart a more likely candidate? Yes, he has said this. And I think it was last week this came up actually as a question. So he said he was thinking about a twist. This was a few years ago. He said he was thinking about a twist to do with a character that was not in the show because they're dead in the show. Now, and then a year later, he said, yep, I've decided I'm going to do it. Now, we don't have any more clues than that, really. Could it be Lady Stoneheart? Possibly. Jane Westerling again? Possibly. My personal guess is that this is either Stannis, simply because he's been very clear, or Barristan, simply because those two are the characters that he's been very clear when name-checking characters who are alive, very much alive, he sort of says in his story, compared to what's going on, or what was going on the show. And Barristan would be interesting. Perhaps Barristan could discover from Tyrion, who will probably meet early on in the Winds of Winter, about Aegon. What does he do then? That would be an interesting twist. Similarly, another person could be Mance Rayder, who may well have a twist. I think he may have a twist with the Horn of Winter. But Lady Stoneheart, I think everything is a twist as far as that's concerned. I don't think that there's anything she can do now which I think George R. R. Martin would specifically count as a twist. We know what she's going to do now. She's following down this road of vengeance. The twist would be if she stops for some reason. So I don't think that's likely. And the twist about Jane Westling, which was Rob's wife being pregnant, I think we're probably pretty sure now that she's not. She's certainly been fed a lot of drugs to try and make sure that that's not the case. AK Channel TV, thank you for the super chat, saying, hello all, where does the Riverlands loyalty to the Starks come from? Is it relatively new? Yes, it is relatively new. So the thing about the Tullys was that Hoster Tully was a very politically savvy person, and he was probably at the heart of this building up this network of alliances. The Tullys needed to, because they are probably the weakest of the houses paramount, and so he was trying to tie his house to the Starks by marrying Catelyn to Brandon Stark. That was his plan. So that then you get the tying of that. Obviously, that switched across to Ned, but then you also get the tying of his house through Lysa to House Arryn. Now, That, however, was a link that he personally, it was soured for him because Blackfish Brynden Tully decided to head off with Lysa, and Hoster thought this was just an abandonment of his family and honor and all the rest of it. And so that relationship was a little bit soured. So the link between the Tullys and the Starks was very strong from then on, added to which the Stark children, a lot of them were very Tully in their colouring. So that's where the sort of the link comes from. They do appear quite Tully-ish. And it is a relatively recent political link. Okay, I think that's me caught up on the chat. Catherine Fursith saying, "Hi Robert, the Riverlands has a very distinct role in the history of Westeros, it seems. Its real-world comparison might be Poland from European history in the last century, being frequently overrun and smashed by powerful neighbours, suffering devastation from being the battleground in other countries' wars, weakly defendable borders, and few, if any, strong houses and lords seem to define it. Still, there seem to be at least a couple of houses that place honour high, namely House Mallister and House Blackwood. Could I offer some background and characteristics on them?" Yeah, I'm very happy to. So when I said that the Tullys were not the sort of the oldest or the richest or the most powerful, these are two of the houses that do fit that bill. The Freys, incidentally, are much more recent. They are very rich because of the money they make from all the people having to pay the toll to get over the river, but they're not held in particularly high esteem by other people. House Mallister are a very, very ancient house, and they have been in Seaguard, which is on the coast. Just if you go up to the northwest of the Riverlands, there's a bit of the coast there that they guard against the attacks of the Ironborn. So that is what they do, and they've been doing that for millennia. So they take this role very seriously as these kind of protectors of the mainland. And so they have got quite an illustrious history. If you go back, there's a lot of people that you can see appearing. The name Mallister appears in the lists for lots of tourneys and the like. So they're very strong, noble, knightly tradition as well. House Blackwood are a first men house. Now, the legends are that they used to actually be in the north. They used to actually be in charge of large swathes of what we know of as the Wolf's Wood, which is right next to Winterfell. But the Starks pushed them out and pushed them down out of the north, and they set up shop in the Riverlands and were there ever since. So they have got this very strong attachment to the faith of the old gods, and that's something they've stuck to, despite the fact that almost everyone around them, when the Andals came in, switched over to the faith of the Seven. They did not. They stayed where they were, and they started getting this long-running enmity between them and House Bracken, their next-door neighbours, which was started by the fact that the Blackwoods felt or suspected that the Brackens had poisoned their weirwood tree, which is immense. I think that was the word that is used of it. This is one of the largest, if not the largest, weirwood trees we know about in Westeros at all. This was absolutely huge, and it was poisoned. So House Blackwood also have got a couple of very important members there. They have married into the Targaryen family twice. The first time was with Aegon V, and the second time was with the mother, or not married into actually. So the mother of Brynden River's Bloodraven was a Blackwood, which is where he gets his first men blood from, which allows him to be this green seer. So they have got a very important role to be playing as the faith of the old gods representatives south of the neck. What connects the two of them is that they were both a long time, this House Malastare and House Blackwood, they were both kings at the time. When the time of the petty kings, they both had these little kingdoms which sort of grew and expanded and shrunk and all the rest of it, before eventually they all sort of came under this one banner of being in the Riverlands. So yes, we get these two ancient houses compared to House Tully that had a much smaller sort of inheritance, and that was so we're left with the situation in the Riverlands where the ruling house are not the most powerful, which is also incidentally the case in the Reach, because House Hightower are the most rich and powerful in the Reach, but everywhere else, broadly speaking, the most powerful house is the house that's in command. Robles the Watcher, thank you, saying hello from Chicago. With the Stark statues or dead possibly rising, will Lyanna hang on, I just missed it. Will Lyanna be the twist confirming Jon's lineage? That's okay. So for those who don't know this theory, it's a theory that I've been working away at for a long time. The idea that the dead of House Stark, we're obviously back up in the north now, so we'll be back in the Riverlands in a moment. I'll try and answer this one as pithily as possible. The idea that the dead Starks will rise from the crypts of Winterfell, I think, is a reasonably well-established one. The twist that I think, I've done a video on this if you're at all interested, is that it could well be the statues themselves that rise, because otherwise what point is an army of ghosts against the army of the dead? What if the statues themselves rise? It is the statues themselves that are anthropomorphized in all the time when we go down into the crypts, and there's other evidence. But anyway, this means that if Lyanna has been Lyanna's body was brought up, we know that she's got a statue. Does this mean that Lyanna's statue is going to rise? That is a possibility that I have certainly thought of. It would be absolutely epic. And are they able to speak? Who knows? What would these statues be like when they rose? Again, who knows? So I don't think the twist is that it's Lyanna, for the simple reason that George R. R. Martin was talking about a character who is dead on the show, whereas Lyanna is clearly dead in the books as well. So I don't think that is what's actually going to happen, but I love the idea that Lyanna's statue will be important and perhaps will become animated. Question from where I think I must have missed one. Nope, here we go. Question from Jibberdol. Thank you so much, saying, hi Robert, what can you tell us about Tansy? Do you think this is the same woman Arya meets at the Peach? Hoster fought there, so maybe he got nursed. Yes, and Carl Karsnark, I did spot you asked this one a couple of times in the chat as well. Yes, so this is a mystery that I've not delved into, I have to admit, so I will give you my initial thoughts on this one. I'll go and have a little bit more of an investigate. But Tansy, this is Hoster Tully. When he died, his last word was Tansy. Now, the question is, who is Tansy? Now, the implication is this must be a woman that he loved, but and this probably played into his personality, the fact that he held honor and decided to that he couldn't have her as a, I don't know, a woman by his side when he has to be Lord Paramount. The possibility that this is, do you say that Arya met someone at the Peach? Yes, it's Hoster. I think you're right. He did fight there. Maybe he got lost. I don't think we've got the information to back that up. I would have to double check that though. I think, for my money, this is actually George R. R. Martin doing a little bit like a Citizen Kane thing. Rosebud is that, yes, we can come up with theories and ideas and all the rest of it, but fundamentally it is supposed to be enigmatic, and it's supposed to be this thing that we aren't going to get to the absolute bottom of. It's also, I think, reminiscent. George R. R. Martin's mind does work this way. I don't know whether he was attempting it this time or not. When Daenerys is in the House of the Undying, she has a vision of what is Rhaegar dying and calling out a woman's name. Now, the woman's name that he's calling out, the assumption is Lyanna, the woman he loves, but is not the woman that he married, or first married at least. Now, could this be the kind of a reference across to that? Who is Tansy? Tansy's the woman that he loved, but actually not the woman that he married or first married anyway. So that is if anything, I think that is something that George R. R. Martin's just playing around with, this idea that we might start seeing a few echoes across. He likes doing this kind of thing where stories echo across from one thing to another. We talk about foreshadowing, we look back to the legends and how legends are sort of echoed in the current story, but he also does that in stories that we have going on at the same time in the main story, echoing backwards, which is what this would be. Kevin Warner, what are you most looking forward to in the Duncan Egg show? Well, it happening if it happens. This is all I should say again. Normally, I don't sort of comment too much on these things until we get them actually confirmed, because who knows, that this could be just a rumor. If it happens, then that would be fantastic. What I would actually like for Duncan Egg is actually not a TV series so much as I would personally like it to be feature length, maybe even films. It would probably work for the Duncan Egg stories. As a novella, I think that you could work that into one thing rather than trying to stretch each story out. We've only got 3 stories. We're not going to get the 4th story until after he's finished The Winds of Winter, and he said he's not going to write the 5th until he's finished A Dream of Spring. So really, we've only got 3 or possibly 4 to go on. I do not want them expanding out beyond that without having George R. R. Martin on board completely. So that's what I'd be looking for. But in terms of what this will not surprise anyone who watches this channel, what I would look forward to the most in that are the sightings of Bloodraven, because this is him in his prime and his pomp as the hand of the king, the power behind the throne, the person with the 1,000 eyes and one who sort of pops up here and there and seems to be manipulating all events from behind the scenes. That, I think, to see that would be absolutely fantastic. I think that's me caught up on the chat for the moment. I should drop back there in a bit. Alex J, though, from Patreon, saying, "Hey, Robert, I always forget to ask these questions, but I wanted to reiterate a huge theme in comments every time that these live streams are such a welcome treat to the week. That makes me very happy. So thank you so much for saying that. How much do the rivers themselves play into the history and lore of the Tullys or other ancient houses? Are there any supernatural or religious ties or river magic in the legends like we see with other cultures close to the rivers or water?" I think it's fair to say not to the same extent at all. If you're thinking about the Rhoynar or the Iron Islanders. Now, in the Riverlands, yes, there's a lot of identifying with sort of river imagery, the fish and things like that, but they haven't developed a religion around it, for example, which is what happens with the Rhoynar, also with the Ironborn. The reason for that, I think, is that some of the Riverlands were very much first men, although all of it to start with were first men. And they had their religion, which was the religion of the old gods. Then, when the Andals came in, they also had their religion, the Faith of the Seven, when they came in. So we do not have this one culture that's been sat there since the year dot that has developed their theology around their geography, which is what has happened, it would appear, with both the Rhoynar and the Ironborn. Now, there's obviously more to it than that, because yes, there is some kind of water magic connected with the Rhoynar, and also to a degree, it seems, with the Ironborn. But that seems to be the way round that the causality seems to be going. But that doesn't happen in the Riverlands, because in the Riverlands they already had a religion when they came in. Shannon I. Adams saying, all felicitations on this beautiful day. And straight back at you. You often say, when in doubt, blame Bloodraven. Not as a contradiction, I have a saying too, but when in doubt, blame a Tully. Lysa, Catelyn, and Edmure seem to be supremely gifted with bad judgment and timing that directly leads to tragedy for their houses, the Starks and most of the North and the Riverlands. I vacillate between seeing each of them as culpable for their roles in this tragedy and seeing Catelyn and Edmure's bad decisions as catalysts only. Lysa is definitely culpable. How do you view the Tully siblings and their actions in the War of Five Kings and the fall of Robb Stark's kingship? Right. So, yeah, I think we need to deal with them separately. Lysa definitely was aware of what she was doing. She did it out of love for Littlefinger, but I don't think that gives her a free pass in any way. She was definitely culpable. Edmure, I think he made weak decisions, but fundamentally he then was surrounded by stronger characters than him who led him to where he needed to be. And we see this again and again and again. He's told, you now need to marry this person. Now you need to, Jaime sends him in, and you need to go off and turn over Riverrun to me. It's always him being manipulated by other people. Occasionally, this is the problem that he seemed to have, is occasionally he wishes to assert his own independence. And because he's not had this nurturing influence to bring him up to be able to make those decisions in a safe way, that means that when he's inexperienced when it comes to the real world. Cat is a very different character. Cat, I'm doing a reread or re-listen through the books at the moment. I'll get back into it on Twitter if you're interested. Follow me there if you want my views. I'm going through chapter by chapter with my thoughts. Cat, for the first few chapters of Game of Thrones, I have gained a new appreciation for her. This is in no way undermining the fact that, yes, she treated Jon horribly. But she also is clearly very clever. One thing I hadn't spotted before with her was that she is the person who figures out that, other than Tyrion, she's the person who figures out exactly what happened with Bran being pushed out of the window. She knows what it is. She knows what was going on. Nobody else seems to have figured it out, but she does. And a couple of times she's there in a room when her and Ned have got some information, and we just read it from her perspective. When she just thinks, okay, I'll be quiet for a bit and let him catch up, let him figure it through and realize what we have to do, because she understands him, and she also understands things politically in a way that Ned certainly doesn't. So I think Catelyn is a catalyst. That's my current take on her. Certainly in the bits of book one that I've been rereading, Catelyn the catalyst. She is the person whose decisions are what push events, make events happen. She's the one who insists that Jon goes to the war, or she doesn't insist he goes to the war, but insists that he cannot stay in Winterfell. And as a result, Jon goes to the wall. She's the one who kidnaps Tyrion and heads off. She's the one who goes down to King's Landing with the dagger to alert Ned to be hunting for the truth. It's her decisions all the way through this that are driving so much of the action. So that would be my take. Whether you consider those to be bad decisions, my view is that most of the time they are driven by her passion rather than her intellect. I think that she is a very clever person, but in the moment she follows her heart rather than her head, and that I think is where she comes from. So I think they're all different people. I think that Edmure is weak and sometimes trying to prove himself in a way that he has to overcompensate for his normal disposition being surrounded by lots of other strong individuals. Lysa obviously is absolutely captivated by somebody and is basically doing his, or being manipulated by him hugely. Cat is being the catalyst. So that is where I see their role. Question from, I think I did have some more questions coming up in the chat. Yes, Mark Keener saying, oh, just a show of support. Thank you so much. Thank you, Robert, for your great content. I listen all through my work, especially the long days working from home. I missed the Traveler's Guide. I hope you decide to do Middle Earth. Well, thank you. I love that I'm there accompanying your working day. In terms of the Traveler's Guide to Middle Earth, I would love to. I get asked this a lot. I think the problem we have actually is a copyright issue, and this is an incredibly dull one. The Tolkien estate and the holders of the Tolkien estate are renowned for being clamping down on absolutely anything that looks like it might be treading on their toes. A couple of Lord of the Rings YouTube channels that I know and respect have had to change their names simply because they had names that were sounded vaguely Middle-earthy. They don't mess around. So what I don't want to do is do something which is immediately going to put all the effort in and get it immediately taken down. So I'm trying to think of more creative ways to capture the spirit of the Traveler's Guide without doing it in exactly that same way. So I've not given up on the idea, but I'm just trying to work out the best way of doing something like it. Ghoul City, thank you, saying, do you expect a Red Wedding 2.0, an attack on the twins? Who will do it? Blackfish, Stoneheart, Wolfpack? Maybe we'll see more of the splinter group of the Brotherhood without banners. Yeah, so I do expect a Red Wedding 2.0. I've got some questions from my patrons coming up on this, but there are so many people who hate the phrase now. They have to go down. I don't think this is going to be just Arya going in and killing lots of people. I don't think that's how it's going to be on the show. I think the fact that it's in the Riverlands implies to me one of two things. Clearly, there are two groups who are currently going around seeking vengeance on the Freys above absolutely everything else in the Riverlands. There's, in the north, the Manderleys are as well. Secretly, they're doing a lot of damage to the Freys. But down in the Riverlands, then the two groups are Lady Stoneheart's Brotherhood without banners and Nymeria's Super Wolf Pack. So who is going to do this? Well, it's going to be some combination of the two of them. I think the other Brotherhood without banners are going to try and do good works, but it's not about, when I say this splinter, going their separate ways. A lot of the people left the Brotherhood without banners when Lady Stoneheart took over. In terms of the Blackfish, I think his main aim is to be restoring the honor of House Tully, which I think is going to be focused around Riverrun. So we've got the Brotherhood without banners and the Super PAC, and I think a combination of the two of them, I could just see the Super PAC descending on the twins when the Brotherhood have already got their way in. I think that certainly seems to be the visually that would work for me, but we have to look at motivations here, because people aren't just going to do stuff randomly, and there are two groups who are actively hunting down the Freys right now: Lady Stoneheart and the Super PAC of Wolves. Jamie McKenna, hola to you too. Towards the end of a recent stream, you were talking about journeys with characters like Sansa returning home, which made me wonder whether Jon might ever return to Dawn or the Tower of Joy for Dawn. Thanks. That's interesting. So, so Jon being born in Dawn, is he going to return there? Now, I think the answer is no. I think he will end up with the Sword Dawn, which probably, yes, you can take the lyrical echo there, and that may well be intentional by George R. R. Martin. But I don't personally think he's going to go back to Dawn, or indeed go back to where the Tower of Joy was, because the Tower of Joy is not there anymore. When I was talking about journeys, I was talking about the way that George R. R. Martin often likes to use physical journeys as a way to show a character journey. Now, Sansa's the classic example of this. She starts off in Winterfell, not wanting to be in Winterfell, wanting to be down south in King's Landing, goes down to King's Landing, realizes that actually that's not what she thought it was, and her journey on the way back is her understanding that actually the safest and best place for her is Winterfell. So that's her character journey mapped out with a physical journey. Dany is also going to have this one, which is sort of going to take around. I think that will probably end up in Dragonstone. With Jon, I think, though, that his character brings him back to Winterfell. I think that's where his character arc takes him. So he starts off effectively in Winterfell in this story. Yes, I know that he was born all the way to the south, but really his arc is going to take him back and around to end up, I think, at Winterfell. What it might do, rather than him go to Dawn, it might lead to him ending up somewhere like the Ruby Ford if the war gets that far south, the place of his father's death. That would certainly bring some sort of echoes there. Brendan saying, hey, nothing to say right now. Love you. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. Have I got any more questions? Mutiny VT, The Traveller's Guide to Fantasy. No copyright in that title. Thank you. Yeah, that's a good thought. Why not just specific to Middle Earth? And yes, as we're talking about this, Tinkerbell, B11. Do you want to do some more Traveller's Guides for your patrons? Yes, definitely. I would like to do that. Let's also American Venom. Thank you so much for just popping in and saying that the content is great. Thank you very much, and for the thumbs up. Okay, I think that's me caught up on the chat, but the link across, just as somebody was there talking about Patreon, gives me the chance that I like to take every single time. Patrons, thank you. Your support it means so much to me, so thank you so much. If you want to support this channel, the best way to do it is becoming a patron. There is a link down in the description. If you're watching live, there will be a link somewhere in the chat, I'm sure. Benefits of being a patron, as well as just supporting the channel: you get priority questions for these live streams to various levels. There are also various other benefits, like at $5 level, then you get access to all the audio I do. I did, for example, some audio recordings of the pre-release chapters of The Winds of Winter. You can find them if you dig down into there. $10 level, you get a thank you, the description to every video, and also every now and then I go to my $10 patrons and say, hey, what do you want me to do next? And they get a chance to say what it is that we're going to be doing next on this channel. So if you're at all interested in that, there is a link down in the description. Questions. Let's go to some questions from my patrons now. Londuck20 saying, hi Robert, we know the prologues tend to introduce us to things in later chapters and or books. So is it possible we could see the prologue in Winds through the eyes of Nymeria? This would then foreshadow a later Ghost POV. What do you think? I like that idea. So for those who haven't picked up on this, the prologues, George R. Martin tends to do prologues for his books. Sometimes he does epilogues, but prologues more often. And these sort of introduce a key theme for the book, and they tend not to be, or they haven't been, from a normal POV character. This is from some other random person who often we haven't really heard from before, or just like might have heard from before but don't know much about. And often they die. So that's what the role of it seems to be. Now, the question is, what is it? What sort of theme is going to be introduced for the Winds of Winter? Now, I love this. Well, the one hint that we've got is that this is going to have Jane Westerling, Robb Stark's widow, is going to be involved. That does not mean it's from her POV. In fact, I suspect the fact that George R. Martin has said that says that it probably isn't. I love the idea of this involving the wolves. Now, how does that tie together? And the more I think about it, where is Jane Westerling? Jane Westerling is being taken back she's in the control of the Lannisters. She's been sent off to the Westerlands now. So there is a sort of a small convoy heading that way. I think not almost certainly, but in my mind, almost certainly, the prologue chapter is therefore en route. Something must happen en route. And there are so many groups in the Riverlands with an interest in stopping her going off west into the Lannisters' control. One of them has to attack. Now, there are so many possibilities here. But I do very much like the idea that it's the wolves. We know that they have been attacking groups of humans, the Freys in particular, a baggage train. So they are growing in confidence, and we've heard again and again that they are gaining in confidence in attacking humans. And George R. Martin specifically said that they are going to be used. So my favorite idea at the moment is that this will be attacked by wolves, and she is going to be freed. And we're going to see it then from what POV? From Nymeria's, it's possible, but the hint therefore would be that Nymeria would die. So perhaps not. My best guess then would be just a random soldier, maybe. That will be in complete George R. Martin's style. This idea of we have characters who are otherwise, they haven't got a particular role going forward. Pate didn't have a role. The Waymar Royce didn't have a role. Yes, he was a lord, but I mean, we don't get the great and the good here. We just get Um, the in fact, I say weighing my voice. Obviously, the prologue for Game of Thrones, he wasn't actually the POV character. He was in it, but he wasn't. We actually got it through, I think it was Will's perspective. So a random member of the Night's Watch. So this is the way that George Martin works, is that he has random, nobody really characters who may have some important role to play, but it's not that they're significant to the story. Michael W. saying, will Lady Stoneheart learn that the Brotherhood knows both Arya is alive and kept her from Riverrun, and therefore from reuniting with Catelyn? So Lady Stoneheart knows that Arya is alive. They're hunting for her. That this is something that we know, that they're specifically looking for Arya. So yes, she will. The question is, where is Arya? And Arya has long gone, obviously, but they're hunting down leads for her at the moment. Yes, we've got a lot of the members of the Brotherhood who are aware of what is going on there. Question from Sylvester Snow. What's your best... I said we'd have some Blackfish questions coming up. What's your best guess as to the plans of the Blackfish? Where has he gone, and who do you think he is teaming up with? Julie Erickson says, my question is about the Blackfish. What do you think George R.R. Martin has in store for him? I personally hope he will somehow be important for saving House Tully. He's considered the black sheep of the family, going his own way, refusing to marry, thereby rejecting the house words of family, duty, and honor. However, I think he has done the most, exemplifying family, duty, and honor. I think that is a really good point. Thank you for that, Julia. I think that he is an exemplar of what the House Tully should be about, according to their house words. He decides to come back. He doesn't ever abandon House Tully. He is there going to, when he goes off to the Vale, he is there because that's where Lysa is going. And when he hears about what's happening in the wider world, he then asks Lysa to let him go, and it's no, but he decides to go because he is a Tully, and that is what he says, and so he heads off with Catelyn, and that is what drives him. His family, his duty, and his honor. So yes, I think it is a very George R.R. Martin thing for the person who is viewed as being the least honorable to actually turn out to be the most honorable, the person who protects and saves the family. So linking this in with Sylvester's question, what is going to be happening with him? I think that yes, he is going to be the person who plays the main role in re-establishing Tully rule, is probably the wrong word, but the Tully position in the Riverlands. So he escaped from Riverrun, but one of the things that we don't talk about all that much is that we get Jaime let the garrison out as well, or the Blackfish's garrison also. He just let them wander off out into the Riverlands. I am pretty sure that the Blackfish will find them. The Brotherhood, we know that there's a blacksmith around, happily, so perhaps they can get some weapons. I think that he is going to play a part linking up with the Brotherhood without banners to reclaim Riverrun. So what is going to happen at a high level, I think, in the Riverlands, in the Winds of Winter, is that as it starts, the Lannisters think that they're in control across the piece. But then by the end of the Winds of Winter, I suspect we're going to be seeing that was paper thin. And all of these groups that are around and about the Riverlands, the Super PAC, the Brotherhood without banners, the people who splintered off from the Brotherhood without banners, the Blackfish's garrison, all of these different groups will re-establish their own control back in the Riverlands of a sort. So this will tie in incidentally with Cersei losing power down in King's Landing. So she is going to, instead of thinking that she's in charge of the Seven Kingdoms, suddenly she will realize that she is not in charge of the Seven Kingdoms. In fact, the only place that is safe for her is back at Casterly Rock. So that, I think, is her journey. But yes, so in the Riverlands, this is what Blackfish is about. He may well end up joining sort of the fight against the others or something like that, but certainly in this book, it's about reclaiming Tully house honor. Question from Eric Ferg saying, one of the stated goals of the Brotherhood under Stoneheart is killing Boltons. Will the Brotherhood leave the Riverlands to accomplish this? I think no. So yes, so the first point you make, that one of the stated goals, so Lady Stoneheart's stated goals, effectively, she doesn't really state them because she just rasps out stuff which you can't really understand, but she's gaining vengeance on the people who have wronged her family. And the main focal point about that is what happened at the Red Wedding, because that is obviously imprinted deep in her mind. And because she was brought back after a few days, then not much of her is left, just this last feeling of gaining vengeance. And it's gaining vengeance specifically on those who wronged her and her family at the Red Wedding. So what does that mean? That means the Freys, obviously, they're top of the list. It also means the Lannisters, and it means the Boltons. Now, the Freys are going to be taking up most of her time, I suspect, in the Winds of Winter. Is what will happen after that? Will they want to go to try and take on the Boltons? Personally, I suspect by that point, the Boltons actually won't be much of a thing anymore. I think that the Starks and the Great Northern Conspiracy Lords will have taken Winterfell, and we shouldn't forget the distances and timing and all. This is months of journey that it would have to be to head up to Winterfell. So I think by the time she has managed to eradicate the Freys from the Riverlands, then actually the Boltons will already be gone. There will be bigger baddies on the horizon after that. Question from the chat. I think I had two questions, actually. One was from Berus Aurelius, which is a great name. I look forward to these streams every week. Thanks for the great content. Well, thank you very much. It's what makes the chat great is everyone in it with the fantastic. I don't get a chance to read out everything. We'd be here all night if I read out everything, but the quality of comments and questions is exceptional. So thank you. A question: do you think Lady Stoneheart will use Jaime to take the twins? Also, how do you think Stoneheart's arc will end? She could. I think this is definitely one of the things that she could be using to do it. So to take the twins, yes, you could. You could just attack them, but it's a castle, and the Brotherhood without banners. Even if they've got support from, say, a whole load of wolves, it's not a huge army that can siege a castle. Added to which, it's actually two castles. Even if one of the castles falls, then you can just go across the bridge to the other castle. So they do need some clever way to get in. Now, it would, I think, make a lot of thematic sense for Jaime, just in terms of what he's been doing in the last book leading up to this. Was he just basically went on this tour of taking the main cities and castles in the Riverlands. So he went there and just sort of one after another. He's just done this tour of all of them: River Run, Raventree Hall, everywhere that's sort of still holding out. It would actually make sense thematically if he ended up taking the twins, but not for the Lannisters, for the for Lady Stoneheart, and it would also, obviously, thematically, with the Lannisters send their regards. Jaime Lannister, indeed, sends his regards. That would work very well, because he is a person that Walder Frey would not turn away. So, yes, this would make a huge amount of thematic sense. And the question is, what does, when he arrives, then when he arrives with the Brotherhood without banners, Lady Stoneheart's first instinct probably will just be to kill him, but they will probably also want to hold some sort of mock trial, and Brienne will almost certainly try to intercede on his part. And then we're left with, I had ages ago, I had Lady Gwyn from Radio Westeros on, and we were talking our way through the Brotherhood without banners, and she very eloquently set out the fact that there's this kind of trifecta of oaths and promises going on between these three characters, between Lady Stoneheart / Catelyn, Jaime, and Brienne, in that they've all made promises one to another. And the promises are all connected in with protecting the Stark children in one way or another. And so what Lady Stoneheart may do is something along the lines of, well, you have to prove your worth. This seems to be what has happened with Brienne, is that she was killing Brienne, and Brienne said, okay, I'll give you my sword. And then she seems to have been immediately sent out on this mission to go and get Jaime Lannister, which will be quite interesting if that's the approach she takes all the time, which is the about to kill him and then saying, okay, you have to prove your worth, because that seems to have been a, go on, Brienne, you prove your worth. You show me that you're going to honor your word to me here. So then it would make sense to me if that is the purpose of why she's got Jaime. It may be quite a long time before they get all the way up to the twins, but yes, I like this idea. It works well. I've said it before that the Riverlands, as if you try and work out the plot of what's happening in the Riverlands in the Winds of Winter, it's the hardest bit out of all of the different plot lines. Not because we don't know the motivations of the different characters or the broad arcs that they're following. We know where Jaime's broad arc is going. We know where Brienne's and Lady Stoneheart's is all going. But because there are so many different groups in the Riverlands that any of them could meet up with each other at any given point, and that will send them just pinging off in a different direction. So that is what makes the Riverlands complicated. And I think this is deliberate by George R. R. Martin, because this is what the Riverlands is like. It's complicated. It's confused. This is the epicenter of the war and of politics and all the rest of it, always changing and shifting sands. So that is what we've got going on here. But that all said, is Jaime going to be the one who's going to go in and claim it? I love the idea, and it certainly works both in terms of his own personal arc and the kind of the thematic, him working his way through the castles of the Riverlands and gaining them not with battle, which is a big change for him. Jay Chef, thank you for the super chat. What influence can we see of Blackfish on Littlefinger? A streak of being beyond social traps? Any role of Littlefinger in Riverlands further? Okay, so this, I think, is a reference to the fact that Littlefinger was he was obviously fostered at Riverrun, and he seemed to form a bond with the Blackfish, and so he sort of followed him around a lot. And this does mean that you do have to then look to see, as you say, what impact does this have? So we get, with your being fostered somewhere, surely you're going to be impacted by your surroundings there. Now, I think out of everything, you would have to say that this is the thing that is most like the two of them. They do not play by the rules. They do what they want to do. And so that, if anything, is what Littlefinger might have picked up from Blackfish. Certainly this idea of family duty and honor doesn't seem to have gone his way, but the idea that you do your thing even if the head of your house or whatever is telling you to do something else, that is very Littlefinger, that you do your own thing, you make your own judgments, and you do not have to tell everybody all the reasoning behind why you're doing the different things. You just go on, do them. And has Littlefinger got a role in the Riverlands further? Yes, obviously he's got an interest in Harrenhal, and his bigger plan, as far as we can tell, is to be using his positions and Sansa's positions to be building up a huge political empire. He thinks between him and Sansa can control, obviously, the Vale. He will soon come to the idea that Sansa has got a valid claim to be the Stark in Winterfell. When Robb is obviously dead, if he hears that the two Stark boys are dead as well, and Arya has gone missing, then she is perhaps the person people can rally behind, particularly if Rickon reappears and then dies. Then he will probably see that as an opportunity there. And because of his claim to Harrenhal, and also the fact that we get Sansa as being the eldest, one might say, with Robb's death, the eldest remaining child of the eldest child of Lord Hoster. If we get a chance for him to make a claim through her to the Riverlands, then yes, I think he would definitely claim it. Whether that will come to fruition, I do not know, but he certainly has his eye on it as that being a part of the bigger plan. Okay, I think that's me caught up on questions in the chat for a moment. Danny Ferguson saying, is the Riverlands like East Europe? I didn't. Yes, one of my questions from my patrons was about this with Poland. Yes, to a degree. It's obviously sort of based on the Midlands in the UK, which is very sort of low-lying area, lots of sort of canals and rivers and whatnot going through it. But in terms of sort of, if you have to understand how it fits in with the world, I think this idea of sort of those areas within Europe, when there was fighting going on between lots of city-states all over the place, and they were reforming and all the rest of it. If you pick some areas there that are not particularly well defendable, they're quite flat, they're not mountainous or anything like that, then yes, that's probably the idea, that there are many my patron came up with the idea of Poland in the 20th century, where lots of people sort of charged through it from one way or the other for their own purposes. Belgium is another example, also from the 20th century. But there are many. Question from Diego Godoy saying, "Hola, Robert. Hola. What role do you think Edric Dane will play in the rest of the story? Will he just be a minor character of the Brotherhood and his whole role be taken up by Darkstar?" So this comes back to the 5-year gap. The 5-year gap is something that George R.R. Martin was originally planning to do in his story, or thought about doing in his story. Partway through, he thought, let's have a gap between books where all of the younger characters, the Stark children, for example, can grow up a bit, the dragons can all grow a bit. And so he introduced a few characters that are younger, thinking that they would be a lot older when the story came to its ending. He then abandoned the 5-year gap idea and just sort of like extended the story a little bit, changed a little bit of dragon lore, that kind of thing. So what that has meant is that there are a few seams that he's had to sort of like paper over a little bit. The classic example is the one of Edric Dane, who was up for, it would appear, a big role towards the end of the story. However, he now will not be old enough because he started off very young. So George R. R. Martin introduced later on this character of Darkstar, Gerald Dane, who is going to be taking over, it would appear, what Edric Dane would have done. And he probably, that means, this is Dawn politics, so we're not going to do that in too much detail as we're talking about Riverlands, but that probably means that he's going to take the sword Dawn. He's going to head over to and join Aegon the Sixth, Fagon's retinue, become a part of the Kingsguard there, and that's how the sword Dawn re-enters the story. So that was going to be Edric Dane's role, but what is he going to do now? It's possible George R. R. Martin may just sort of drop him, but I think there's an interesting point here in his name, which is this is actually, when you think through it, one of the big hints to the fact that well, first of all, that this was not Ned and Ashara together, because if House Dane named their heir after Ned Stark, that means that he must have done them some great duty. And they hold him in extremely high regard. Edric Dane says as much, that, I'd be desperate to see this person I'm named after because he's held in such high regard. That would not be the case if Ned Stark had seduced Ashara Dane, that she'd had a child, and that he'd then abandoned her, married somebody else, and refused to acknowledge who the child's mother was. That would not have endeared him to the Danes at all. So there is a big clue there that I hope gets a payoff later on. But what might George R. R. Martin do with him? He might take him back down to Dawn. Now he's done his things with the Brotherhood Without Banners. Maybe he will head back down to Dawn. Maybe we will see him actually cross paths with Darkstar. I remember I had Matt Joe Magician on ages ago. He had a worked up theory that maybe their paths would cross even perhaps at the Tower of Joy. That might be an opposite place for them to meet. Now, maybe that will be it, or maybe he will just stick in the Riverlands with the Brotherhood Without Banners and just be the spirit of the original Brotherhood Without Banners. A lot of them have stayed with Lady Stoneheart against their better judgment. So, for example, Thoros has. And if we have got some people who are still there, upholding the spirit of the original Brotherhood Without Banners, then perhaps he could be the sort of the figurehead for that. Bride of Fire. Hi, Robert. What do you think is up with House Darry? During the Hound's trial with the Brotherhood Without Banners, they charge him with the deaths of Lord Mallory and Sir Wilde, committed by the Mountain. Lord Darry is excluded, even though they told Arya he was killed. And it is odd that the characters assume that young Lord Darry is killed when they acknowledge he would have made a good ransom. Do you think that Lord Darry could still be alive? I think the short answer is no. But for those who are unaware of House Darry, which is they're based just northwest, perhaps, of King's Landing, not too far, so they're quite local there. Now, Lord Raymond Darry, he was the lord there originally. He was part of Beric's original Brotherhood Without Banners, and he died at the Mummers Ford. So the Brotherhood Without Banners know what happened to him. Then the Mountain went and killed the some more, attacked Darry itself, killed basically the rest of the male line of House Darry. Now, I think that this is just the, who do they acknowledge and all the rest of it. I think this is just the fact that what happens in the Riverlands and during times of war is that information is not always very easy to understand. Who is it that kills whom and all the rest of it? Rumors about what the Hound did all over the place, but it isn't always him who does these things. Sometimes it's the Mountain, sometimes it's Biter or Rogue. So I think this is just a communication issue rather than anything else. But in terms of House Darry, what we've got here is this being yet another of these houses that the Lannisters think that they've managed to sew up for themselves. So Lancel Lannister had been put in there as Lord. They created a new house Lannister of Darry. But then obviously he found religion, and so that hasn't gone too well. So that they had thought was yet another one of these things that they can just marry the Lannisters into. They can claim the lands, and that would be that. They've done it a couple of other places actually up in the Riverlands. So that, I think, sadly is it for House Darry. They were Targaryen sympathizers. This was the other interesting thing about them, was that when they went searching through House Darry afterwards, they found some banners just hidden away, just in case the Targaryens came back, which is quite sweet, ironic, given the fact that the Targaryens will come back, and they missed out by a matter of a month or a couple of years or something. Eric Fogg, how much of the destruction of House Frey will be self-inflicted through a civil war after the Patriarch's death? Do you picture opposing factions occupying the Twins and ultimately destroying the toll bridge? I don't think I see the... So the Patriot, once Walder Frey has gone, there are a gazillion Freys out there. So yes, there will be lots of people all trying to claim that they are Lord, but I think that the downfall of them will be this, and it is Jamie getting his way in there, but it will be some combination of Lady Stoneheart and the Super PAC just killing all of the Freys. That, incidentally, when they had Arya doing this on the show, they couldn't. We have to always try and work out what is it that they couldn't do on the show, because they just hadn't expanded the story. That they didn't have Lady Stoneheart, they didn't have Nymeria's Super PAC, so obviously they wouldn't be able to do that. And if the Freys were going to go, which they had to go, who was the only person who could do it? Arya. So it does all tie in together. That in the books it would be the people who are actively trying to do that. Anyway, I think Walder will die in that, and that will then leave lots of Freys scattered about all over the place. Some of them are up north, and House Manderley are doing an excellent job of killing all of them. Incidentally, the House Manderley, as they'd agreed to marry, Waymond Manderley agreed to marry two of his daughters to two sons of House Frey, and they both mysteriously died now. Those Freys who were going to marry into the Manderleys, as have many other Freys, a few others who went to White Harbour, and they just mysteriously disappeared, having left the city. So the Manderleys are single-handedly working their way through House Frey in the north. So there are lots and lots of them. I do not think after the Twins have been... or the Freys at the Twins have been sort of wiped out, which I think they probably will, then after that, I do not think that the Freys are going to be regaining control of it. I think that they're going to be a completely decimated family in their homeland and also to the north. There will be Freys out there, but I do not think that they'll be in any position to be squabbling over who takes control of it afterwards. Jay Chef, what do you think the Young Griff faction will do about the Riverlands? I think so. They will focus mostly in on King's Landing to start with, and once they have taken King's Landing and established themselves there, then yes, I think that well, I don't think the Riverlands will be top of their list of priorities, is what I'm sort of gearing myself towards. They will be trying to secure around the south of the Seven Kingdoms to start with, through Dawn, through the Crownlands, in the Stormlands, and across into the Reach. So that's going to be their initial starting point. And then I think that they're going to be faced with huge amounts of problems in King's Landing itself. I think that there will be some degree of plague. Then I think we're going to have Daenerys coming in and trying to attack or take control. So I don't think that he will have the chance to do much in the Riverlands. He might push a little bit forward and north and west, but not significantly. J Lord saying, who would be the most wolfish river lords? Tully, Blackwood, Mallister, Piper, Vance. Who else? I loved Clement Piper's roosting Edwin Frey. I think in terms of when you say wolfish, do you mean like the wolves? Blackwood, I think, they are, because of the link in with the worship of the old gods. They very, very much they've got a huge amount of. It's called Raventree Hall because they have so many ravens which are they're roosting on the on their tree, the dead weirwood tree. So yes, definitely them. But I think House Mallister as well has a kind of a Starkish vibe to them. They are doing their duty. They're strong. They stand by what they need to do, and they fight when needed. So I think that's where I would go with that. Question from Mara Lee. House Tully's motto is family, duty, and honour. Lady Stoneheart feels that it is her duty to revenge her family and their honour by killing anyone who murdered her and her family. She thinks that Bran, Rickon, and Sansa and Arya are dead. What will it take to finally give her souls peace in the end? Will word that they are not dead be enough to convince her, or will she have to physically see her 4 children alive for her soul to be finally at rest? So I think she knows that Arya is still alive. I think she suspects that Sansa is still alive, but she's trying to find them. Now, she is trying to gain vengeance, first of all, for what happened at the Red Wedding. What will get her soul at rest? Well, it has to be once she feels that she's done her vengeance for what's happened, which is probably with the killing of the Freys. If she's killed the Freys and she hears that the Boltons have been destroyed, particularly Roose Bolton, and if the Lannisters have been kicked out from King's Landing, I think that is, in terms of vengeance, going to be a hugely important thing. And if she can then, on top of that, have some confirmation that Arya and Sansa and Rickon and Bran are all still alive, that I think probably would be enough. So her drive is vengeance for wrongs done to her family. If she can right those wrongs or avenge those wrongs, then she will feel that her work is done, I suspect. Matthew Jacob V saying, does anyone know why my PayPal won't highlight to pay for a super chat even though it is connected to my Google or YT account? I'm afraid I don't. Hopefully one of the mods might be able to help you out on that one. Girl Nettles, who ruled the Riverlands before House Hoare? There were lots of different people ruling it. It wasn't so. The Riverlands as a concept is it's relatively new. It's if you think more, and there are many sort of examples of these kinds of things. But if you think along the lines of Germany or Italy back in the 19th century, lots of different city-states and squabbling and all the rest of it, that and then united, and there is now this idea everybody, they were all geographically in the same place, but then they become united. That is the kind of idea that we've got here. It's not exactly, but that's the kind of feel. So the Riverlands had lots of different little kingdoms, and then they were expanding and retracting and all the rest of it. So the most recent was the kingdom of the isles and rivers, but also at previous times then we've had the gardeners in the Reach. They'd expanded out some into the Riverlands for a while. We've had most of the main lordly houses in the Riverlands had kingdoms of their own for a while, so there were lots. Sussex saying that the Storm King from the Stormlands claimed them. There was an ongoing dispute about lots of that. So the Stormlands were a very clearly defined area, but before you had King's Landing being this kind of block in between them, then you have that the border there was where the fighting was, and they were sort of moving to and fro an awful lot. Matthew Jacob V. Oh, you managed to make it work. Excellent. What do you think or hope Tom O'Sevens will get up to in Riverrun? I have fantastic timing. Thank you, Matthew. This time's in. I was about to go to Stacey Burke from my patron, who's got a very similar question saying, please share your thoughts on what Tom O'Sevens will or can do. Now he's planted himself within Jamie Lannister's inner circle. So Tom O'Sevens, for those who do not know, he is a bard, a minstrel, and Tom O'Seven strings. He plays his 7-stringed instrument, and he found himself with Jamie's army, or the Frey army, as it was really, and then Jamie sort of came up and took control, and he was there outside, and he came to the attention of Jamie because Jamie wanted him to play the Rains of Castamere, which to the people in the who were defending Riverrun. The reason, obviously, is that it tells the story of how somebody crossed House Lannister, the Rains, House Rain, and they got absolutely crushed and wiped off of this planet. And Jamie was basically saying, that's what I'm going to do. I will do that. Unless you surrender, I will do that. Whether Jamie was bluffing was an entirely different matter, of course. But as a result of all of that, he manages to be persuading Edmure to go in, and he then commands that the gates be opened and the land and the place given up. But before he does, obviously, the Blackfish escapes. So after all of that, Jamie hangs around for a little bit and then heads off. And Tom O'Seven Strings says, you know what, I think I will stay. And he decides to stay. So there's a small garrison left in there with one of the many Lannisters. Jenna Lannister is there, and Tom says, you know what, I think I'll be the minstrel here for a while. This seems like a good place. And Jamie goes, okay, fine, and leaves him to it. What's he going to do? Well, the secret of Thomas Evans is not a secret to us because we know it, but the people there don't know it, is that he is a part of the Brotherhood without banners. So what's he going to do? Well, obviously, he is then the person on the inside who can, it's a very small garrison, he can be the person who lets people in. If he knows how to do it, then that's absolutely fine. So he can let the Brotherhood without banners, who I suspect will probably meet up with the Blackfish, because the connection there with Catelyn, Lady Stoneheart, and the Blackfish is, I think, quite an important one. They will probably take it with him as being the inside man, opening the gates. We've already discovered with Riverrun, the people who there do not know Riverrun, they're not Riverlands people. All it takes is opening up one of the portcullises just a little bit, and people can swim underneath it. So it only really takes one person on the inside to be able to do that. So I think that's what he's going to be doing. He's going to be the person who will manage to get it back for the Tullys. Okay, question from Bonds. Hi, Robert. A minor character. Hi, Bonds. A minor character no one ever seems to mention, but always seems to flag something for attention for me is Hoss the Hostage. He was roughly 16 or 17 at the end of Feast. He doesn't seem to have any family traits from his father, Titos. He's more interested in books than being a fighter. He's currently off to King's Landing. I think there is potential for this character to be seen as Aegon following the Varys baby swap before the sack of King's Landing. I don't think he is Aegon, just potential for a plot point in Winds. It just seems like George R. R. Martin's style of writing to just give us enough information about Hoss to start us to speculate. Any thoughts? Yes, I do have some thoughts. So for those who do not know, this is a Hoster Blackwood. He's, yes, Hoss the Hostage. The idea, he was the third son of Lord Blackwood, and the idea was that when the Blackwoods surrendered, this was what Jaime's job was in the Riverlands, just to get the Riverland lords to surrender to the Lannisters in order to ensure that they carry on complying with this. Then they took a hostage, and this was the third son, Hoster, who gets sent down to King's Landing. So the question is he Rhaegar? I think you're right in saying he's sorry, is he Rhaegar? Is he Aegon? I think you're right in saying that he isn't. And the subsequent question is, might people think he is? My take is no. He's described as being nearly 7 foot tall, gangly. He's not described as having any particular Valyrian features, so I don't think anyone will mistake him for being a Valyrian. He is very bookish, and he seems to get along okay with Jaime. Jaime even thinks, you know what, Tyrion would love this guy. They can just talk about books all the time. So I think, if anything, maybe he will meet up with Tyrion. That might be a little bit of foreshadowing which was dropped in there. But I think, no, the link across to any of the Targaryens, I can't see that it's there myself. Jay Sheth saying, will we see the others freezing the Riverlands? Yeah, I think that winter is going to come. We already seen it started snowing in Riverrun. This was when Jaime, almost the last we see of Jaime, the penultimate chapter, then it starts snowing, and we get snowdrops falling down on the letter that he's reading and all the rest of it. If it's snowing in Riverrun, then yes, we're going to see this is the winter is truly going to start setting in all the way down there. We are going to see the rivers start to freeze. We get stories of, in winters, the Blackwater Rush froze over, which is all the way down towards King's Landing. So yes, in this winter of all winters, then we are definitely going to see this happening. Is it going to be the others bringing it? Well, they are bringing the worst of it. They are bringing the storm and the icy, bitter cold, but winter itself will fall, and we will see the Riverlands start to become ice covered, which will have lots of implications, I'm sure, for all manner of things in terms of tactics of what people are going to be doing in the Riverlands one. I was just thinking, having suggested that perhaps one of the ways that people could get into the river run is by swimming underneath the gate. I'm now thinking, oh, actually, maybe that will be iced over. Who knows? So yes, we will see it, whether it won't specifically be the others to start with anyway. Ultraviolet saying, hi Robert, no question this week, just a show of support for helping me get through the workday. You are very welcome. Thank you so much for that. I really do appreciate it. Question from Reflective Rambling, I can see in the chat. Hi there. Not so much a question, series of thoughts, which I shall pick up, and a lot of excellent thoughts here. I shall pick up on some of them. Saying one thing about the Riverlands is that it seemed to hold old traditions almost as strongly as the North proper. There's been some possible significance in the fact we don't know the words of houses like Dane and Reed, but lately I've been curious about the Blackwoods. Their words are unknown. Local feuds were sparked by their keeping of the old gods. Their coat of arms has numerous ravens, and there's the matter of Black Alley and her weirwood arrow. Given that weirwoods are considered sacred, I can't imagine many of them being utilised for weaponry. Not as rare as Valyrian steel, but also you have the mountain clans. Like the wildlings, we're more familiar with them. They claiming their first men origin. They worshipped the burned men, worshipped a fire witch. I know there's some nettle speculation, but what about someone more like Melisandre or a worshipper of R'hllor? Or is it just remnants of ancient knowledge as fire as a weapon? So as I say, lots of really interesting things out. So I'll just pick up on a few of those if that's okay. The Blackwoods are very important. To the Blackwoods importance, I think, is mostly going to be in their history, in the fact that they played into the family tree of the Targaryens at just the right time, that the Blackwood mother to Brynden Rivers Bloodraven meant that he got the right powers, and the fact that we then get Aegon the Fifth marrying a Blackwood means that actually, when you're looking down the family tree, given that from after that Targaryen just marries Targaryen, just marries Targaryen, after actually the genetics that they're carrying down is not pure Targaryen, it's actually 50% Blackwood. So they are hugely significant. That the Targaryens, and when you get down all the way to, say, Jon Snow, he has got the Blackwood genetics in him as well. So I think their role is sort of in the past, in the backdrop to all of this. In terms of the weirwood arrow, we get one other example of that happening. Bran sees it happening when he's looking back through the weirwood tree in Winterfell. The hint that is the bastard brother of Torrhen Stark, who was, I think, Brandon Snow, and he did that thinking that he might be able to shoot the dragons with it. So weirwood arrows, yes, people who were worshippers of the old god, it would appear, might do that. It's as long as it's done respectfully, not just sort of like hacking down a tree to use it for your own purposes, then I think, particularly when it's against something which might burn down trees, then I think that's probably acceptable. And just on the mountain clans, this is in the Vale. Perhaps we'll cover this next time, but we did have confirmation in Fire and Blood that Nettles and Sheepstealer did drop down into the Mountains of the Moon, and that she was worshipped there, and then the Maester speculated that that was where the burned men may have come from, because they proved themselves by burning. We don't know, but that is certainly as good an explanation as I think we can find anywhere. We don't always have to believe the Maester's explanations, but that one actually kind of makes sense, given that we've not got any evidence for anything else. Question from Mara Lee. What do you think will happen to Edmure Tully and his wife, Rosalind Frey? Let's not forget he did marry into the family, who is pregnant in the last 2 books. What will be his role or character arc in the end game, either with the War of the Others or the War for the Iron Throne? I think that he will just continue being what he is, which is this pawn being manipulated by more powerful people around him. I think that is what he is about. And so I think he will probably end up being the head of House Tully and founder, or maybe, I don't know, maybe this will be a place, given the fact that he is marrying into the phrase, that maybe he gets the twins. I don't know. But I think that he survives, not through any great strength of his own, but I think that he's just one of these political footballs who just gets being pushed around. I don't think he'd be allowed close to the action again. Alana saying, hello, Robert. Hi. Was a patron before, but lost my job due to COVID, so could only return recently to pledge some support, thanks to my new job selling drugs. Pause for effect. Legal cannabis in Canada. So I'm glad you got another job. That's fantastic. I know this is one of the many side effects of COVID is the impact on people's jobs. So that's fantastic that you've got back into employment. Upon rereading Fire and Blood, I noticed that there were a fair amount of areas of Westeros that seem somewhat more egalitarian in who they'll accept as a ruler. During the Great Council that ended up siding with Viserys I, we see a surprising amount of support for Rhaenys from the north and pockets of other areas. In this period, we see a rise of a lot of strong women, particularly in the Riverlands, with Black Aly and Sabitha Frey, with Dawn included. It seems there are many areas of the map that are fine with capable female rulers. Do you think this is setting us up not just for Lady Sansa of Winterfell, but perhaps a slight shift in women's status in Westeros as a whole? Yes, I do. This is very clearly a shift. George R. R. Martin, in Fire and Blood, one of the things that it has to have been deliberate is that he showed time and time again, although we think of the list of rulers of the Seven Kingdoms, Targaryens, as all being kings, he shows time and time again that that's not actually the case. Now, some of it is slightly under the radar when we get Queen Alysanne, who effectively co-rules. There are laws that she pushes for and makes sure happens. Some of it is, you look at Aegon the Conqueror, who actually spent very little time sitting on the Iron Throne himself, spending most of it out and about, either on these grand tours or at Dragonstone. When he wasn't there, one of his sisters would be ruling in his stead. Perhaps it's the fact that we actually had a queen who sat on the Iron Throne for 6 months and just got washed out of history because her side lost. And again, we get these times when we get people who could or should have been queen of the Seven Kingdoms. The whole point of the Dance of the Dragons centers around this. We get Arya, who twice was next in line to be ruler before somebody else grabbed it from her. So this is a theme again and again and again running through Fire and Blood that George R. R. Martin has been pushing, which is you need to look behind the headlines, and actually Westeros could and should have had more female rulers. So mapping that across to our current story, one of the things that the show definitely did show was the fact that whereas we start with the War of the Five Kings, that mapped very easily towards the end to be the War of the Five Queens. It won't be, I think, that simplistic mapping across in the book, but definitely we have Daenerys, we have Cersei, who will surely take control herself in King's Landing. Sansa, I think, is on this arc leading up to her being the Lady of Winterfell. We have so many of these. We have Yara, who, or Asha, I should say, who almost became the ruler of the Iron Islands. There are so many of these things going on, and even behind the scenes, when we get the hints that the House Reed has got Mira as the heir rather than Jojen. There's so much going on just behind the scenes that I think, yes, this is George R. R. Martin is definitely building up towards something, and a sort of a culture change as much as anything else. Question from, I think there was one here. Oh, here we go. So Jay Sheth, how will Bran's powers enter the Riverlands equation? Children of the Forest and Greenseers, God's Eye, any tweaks they will make in the narrative? So, yes, so the biggest thing here is I think that the point of ending the threat of the others is not about getting a bigger army and killing them all. That is not how the pacifist George R. R. Martin is going to show the way to the final solution to all of this. Is that this is not his answer. The answer to the others is undoing the magic that created them, and that means coming back to the Children of the Forest magic, and that means Bran understanding what happened in all the creation, and that, I think, probably means that is where the Isle of Faces comes into play, because I suspect that he will be able to see what happened there, and I think that may well have been where the creation of the others happened. So that, I think, is what it is, and we will understand the Weirwood network as a living, breathing expression of Westeros, and how the solution to getting rid of the things that do not belong on Westeros, which is what the fire and ice symbolism is about, those are the threats from coming at Westeros, that comes from re-engaging with the spirit of Westeros itself, which sounds quite airy-fairy, but I think that is where we're going with this. So yes, in plain language, Bran is going to be the person in the books, I think, who is central to defeating the others through the use of the Weirwood network and an understanding of how to undo the magic. Mr. E. Knight, thank you for the super chat, saying, the trident, the Manderley sigil of a mermaid holding a trident. Poseidon, god of sea waters, earthquakes, and oddly horses. Any connections here? Any connections between those things? Well, so the Manderleys didn't start off, of course, in the north, so they're not northerners. They belong south of the neck. I can't remember whether they were originally. There will be somebody in the chat who will remember whether they were. It was either the Riverlands or the Reach, but I think it was in the Riverlands. In terms of their trident as a sigil, they're also the mermen. That I don't think that there's a specific thing here. What, if anything, what we've got going on here is they are the symbol of the South in the North, being the gateway to the North, and that is what we've got going on here with the trident. The trident being the sort of the symbol of Westeros south of, if anything, is the Westeros south of the neck. So that, I think, is what is going on. In terms of Poseidon, and this is just water, they have to be connected in with water because that is their role. Their role is safeguarding the water access to the north. Question from, I think I had another question. Vera Glauben saying, just to thank you for helping me get through my extra hours at work. And it's 3:30 a.m. here in Moscow. Love your streams and videos. Thank you. If you're working at 3:30 a.m., then I take my hat off to you. Wow, I hope your work is at least interesting and exciting. And hello to you in Moscow. I think I must have missed question. Andrew Kay saying, do you think the not so distant inclusion of the Blackwoods in the Stark line could have played into the weirwood magic more active in the recent Stark generation? Yes, so this is Lord Cregan Stark, who came down in as part of the Dance of the Dragons, arrived almost at the end of it, in fact, and he married in with the Blackwoods, so Alice Blackwood, perhaps. Yes, they've got that in there. I certainly think that must have helped. The Blackwoods do appear to be a particularly magical family. The Reach, people are reassuring me that it was the Reach, not the Riverlands. But where the House Manderley came from. Bond saying, hi Robert, towards the end of Fire and Blood there is a couple of paragraphs about Alice Rivers at Harrenhal. She claims to have Prince Aemond Targaryen's son, who she calls the rightful king of Westeros. I can't think of a further reference to Alice or this child in any of the future stories. Is there anything, where do you think this might be leading? I don't think there is. Melantha Blackwood was Ned's grandma, says Girl Nettles. Thank you. I don't think so. So this is one of the things which is hanging over for Fire and Blood Part 2, which, as a complete aside, I do sometimes get a bit frustrated when people say with great authority, the winds of winter will never arrive. And I think it maybe it won't, but it probably will. But Fire and Blood Part 2, George R. R. Martin has to write The Winds of Winter, then another Duncan Egg, then A Dream of Spring, and then he's going to write Fire and Blood Part 2. So that is a long way away. So when I talk about what might happen in Fire and Blood 2, if it happens, it is a long way away. But let's try and be positive and assume that it will magically happen. In Fire and Blood Part 2, we'll pick up with a few loose ends from Fire and Blood Part 1, as you would expect. The big one is the dragons have to die. That's the thing which will happen in the next few years. And when I say the dragons have to die, we've got 4 live dragons at that point in the story, 3 of which have gone feral, so to speak. One Morning, which is currently still a young dragon, but is being ridden. And from now on, as far as we're aware, all the dragons that are going to be hatched are all going to be deformed, probably because they've been poisoned by the Maesters video coming out soon. But all the dragons will have to die. So that's the big thing that we know is going to happen. Aegon III, the king, is going to be known as Dragonbane because all the dragons died during his time. Now, also, we've got Alice Rivers, who's a fantastic character in Fire and Blood 1, says that she's got the rightful heir. I think so. This has to be put down by the Targaryens. And I do wonder whether this might tie in the big thing with the dragons dying. Morning has to die somehow. If we've got somebody who is there who thinks that they can potentially kill a dragon with a weirwood arrow, Is that how Morning dies? I don't know. It's a bit tinfoil. We may never ever find out. But I think that the short answer on this is that this will be a succession problem, and it will be dealt with harshly by the Targaryens. Good night, Carolina. Thank you so much for the super sticker. The Jaharis Stargaster saying, hi again, Robert. Hi there. Do you think we'll have any connection or a juxtaposition between the Isle of Faces and the Faceless Men? Thanks. Good question. I don't think there's an obvious one, but the thing which I keep on coming back to with the Faceless Men is that they are not just a cool assassins guild. This is a religion, and this means that what we might think of as their cool catchphrases aren't actually their cool catchphrases. They are their statements of faith. So all men must die is actually a statement of faith. And the moment you take that seriously as a statement of faith, when people do not die when they should, that is actually heresy in their minds. So if we take that as our starting point and we say, okay, what is it that the Faceless Men want? We think they probably do want to get rid of the dragons, but that's secondary to the fact that they actually want to get rid of what has suddenly exploded in Westeros, which is this load of people who just will not die. You've got the others bringing back whites from the dead. You've got these priests of R'hllor who are bringing people back from the dead. We've got this maester down in King's Landing who seems now to be bringing people back from the dead. This is happening all over the place, and this to them will be heresy. So what we have with if you're asking me for some sort of comparison between the Faceless Men and the Isle of Faces from a very narrative perspective, rather than a thematic one, I think that they are both ahead of everyone else in being against both the others and the dragons. And I think that they operate below the radar, both of them. They have got plans that others are not aware of in order to be destroying both of them. So I think that is the echoing between the two of them. Are they actually going to come into contact, work with one another? No. I think they will do what they're doing. Most people will be unaware of what they're doing, how successful they are, and they are okay with that. So that seems to be the sort of the way of it. If you want a slightly more thematic one, it would be that they both retain memories. They the weirwood trees take people's life experiences, and you can actually experience what's going on. Bran can see things that have happened in the past. You can actually, in real terms, experience them. What happens with the Faceless Men is that when you put on the mask of somebody, yes, you can take on their appearance, but also you experience some of who they are. They retain the essence of that person in some way, and you can experience things through their eyes in the same way that Bran can experience things through the eyes of the weirwood tree. Now, why does that matter? Well, it matters on a sort of a meta level with George R. R. Martin is trying to show us the difference between lived experience and written record of something. Written record is never 100% accurate because it's always biased. Lived experience is actually what is going on. He is trying to show us that difference at a kind of a meta level. Also, in terms of the story, we often get Westeros and Essos have things that kind of like mirror images or slightly darkened versions one of the other. You get the shaded evening trees being sort of echoes of what's going on with the Weirwoods and so on. This then is sort of an echo in a dark way of what's going on with the Weirwoods. But really interesting question. I think I appreciate the chance to think through those, because those are links that we don't often make between those two different groups. Let's go to, and I've got 4 or 5 more questions from my patrons. Kendra Summers saying, hello, Robert. Can you talk about the parallels of Jenny of Oldstones and Prince Duncan with Rhaegar and Lyanna? Yes. So this was something, obviously, when we get Jenny of Oldstones, Jenny's song and all the rest of it. So there is, and that is clearly being used as a sort of an echo of what's happening. So the echoes are obviously there in terms of you get this crown prince, heir to the throne, who falls in love with a woman, a worshipper of the old gods, who has flowers in her hair. This leads to the breakdown of an engagement that they hadn't particularly wanted with a Baratheon. Obviously, with Robert Baratheon back in the day, you get Duncan Targaryen, who was Aegon V's oldest son. He'd been engaged to a Baratheon, pardon me, and that failed because of this marriage, and it did lead to a short-term rebellion there as well. Sir Duncan the Tall had to go down, and there was effectively a trial by combat, single combat that went on there. The rebellion got quashed. And then the link across to Rhaegar obviously happens when we get to the deaths of, well, we assume of both of them. When we get Duncan Targaryen, definitely died at Summerhall, and probably Jenny of Oldstones also died there at that same time. Why is that important? Because they died at the exact point at which Rhaegar was born, at the exact place where Rhaegar was born. He was born at the tragedy at Summerhall. So there is a clear link across between them, and the other link that we have across between them, as well as this, that is a sort of an echo between their stories. Again, we've talked about it before. George R. R. Martin creates echoes between different bits of stories just to give us hints about what was happening with Rhaegar and Lyanna and Jon and all the rest of it. But the link is stronger still in that there is the Woods Witch. Jenny's friend who she brought with her down to court was a Woods Witch who looks like one of the children of the forest, 3 foot tall, white skin, red eyes. This is a blood raven colouring. She very probably was staying at Summerhall after the event. She talks when she is the ghost of High Heart, so we hear from stuff from her later on in the story. She talks about gorging on her grief at Summerhall, which implies at least a period of time being there, and we don't hear from her being around and about at all in the intervening period, so probably she stayed there. Rhaegar went back there many times, and whenever he returned, he came back with songs. He wouldn't let anyone else in there. And what does she want? The Woods Witch, the Ghost of High Heart, she wants songs. The links come stronger and stronger. Who was it who prophesied that the prince that was promised was going to come from the line leading down to Rhaegar, the Woods Witch? The link across is incredibly strong between them. It's George R. R. Martin has written a big, thick line there for us all to see. There's more there to dig into about the Woods Witch's role with Rhaegar in prophecy, but I've covered that on other videos, so I won't go into that in too much detail now. Question from let's find it. Duncan Idaho saying, I believe the children, or at least a faction of them, are actively controlling the others. Could the green men be behind it all? Okay, this is a great theory. So George R. R. Martin has teased that we shouldn't expect these races of people to all be exactly the same. He's said that he dislikes things like the orcs are all exactly the same and all the rest of it. They won't be. There will be different factions and all the rest of it. Fantasy fiction often just lumps particular races in to be a particular thing, and he says he doesn't like that. There will always be differences. So he's teased this idea. So we must expect either the others or the children of the forest, I think, to have some kind of distinguishable difference between different parts of different groups or something along those lines. So I like that. The idea that the children are controlling the others, I think, I'm not as sold on personally, because I think the others are going to be killing the children. I think that is what is going on. What is the point of the others? Well, they were introduced originally, it would appear, to be attacking humanity because humanity were wiping out the children of the forest and they were cutting down weirwoods. What has humanity done since then? Well, actually, if you take a sort of a helicopter view on it, over the last while, they've been planting weirwoods more than chopping them down. You get them, the Andals, when they came, they had this great fad of, we must have a weirwood tree here to show that we're embracing the local culture. So actually they were growing more weirwoods rather than chopping them down. The children of the forest have been completely disappeared. Most people think that they're just legends, which seems to imply that none of them been killed recently because nobody thinks that they're there. So why would they bring them out to be killing humans at this point? That bit doesn't quite ring true for me. What does seem to ring true for me is the idea that they initially got out of the control of the children, but the children had ways to push them back to start with. Hence the pact that they had now a common enemy. The children and humans had the first men had a common enemy, and so this is what is going on now, is that they are now coming back. Think that's me caught up in the chat there. Question, I've got 3 more questions. Mara Lee, where the current story left off, House Frey is currently in charge of the Riverlands, I believe. On the show, it was Arya Stark that killed Walder Frey. In the books, it will likely be Lady Stoneheart. If that happens, will winter truly come for House Frey, or does this house still have a role to play in the end game? I think the answer is no, they do not have a role to play in the end game. I think that they are going to get destroyed. They are going to get, this is going to be one of those rare moments where George R. R. Martin gives us what we want. The Freys are going to be that they are going to be butchered in their own castle, and in the north, the Manderleys are going to be wreaking swift vengeance upon them as well. So their role is going to be simply the individuals that are left and what happens to those individuals. Edmure's wife, for example. What happens there? Oliver Frey, I've got a question about in just one moment. What about him? So that is where House Frey's future is. It's the individuals who I suspect will swiftly get rid of the name Frey and make sure that they are associated with other houses, because I think House Frey, having committed the heinous crime of abusing guest right and killing people that they had as their guests under their own roof, then I think that they will be anathema to the people. Eric Fug, I said I got a question about Oliver. So, if the Freys largely are wiped out from within and without, could a Stark loyalist like Oliver Frey ultimately take over the twins? Also, is Oliver the Rosby ward? So the Oliver, for those who are unaware, he was he was squire to Robb Stark, and so goes with him down from the twins and accompanies him in the War of the Five Kings. Now, when he marries, having been promised to the Frey daughter, when he marries for love, then Oliver gets summoned back to the twins, and we think that might be the last we saw of him. When they get up to the twins for the wedding, for Edmure's wedding, then they ask, where is he? And we just get told he's not here. He's I can't remember the exact phrase, but he has business elsewhere, or duties, or something like that. So we don't know what happened to him. So could he end up being given something like the twins? He could. It's entirely possible. I think that the twins is it's one of those castles which will definitely be up for grabs at the end of it, with who's given it. I think that in the short term, it'll be given to whoever can hold it. So maybe it'll be the Blackfish. Maybe he will get the chance to do it, having regained Riverrun. Maybe then that will be what he's left with, is holding on to that. He's got experience of a castle on a river, and also holding a pinch point, which was what his role was over in the Vale. So that's what, could Oliver potentially in the long run he could do, but I think not in the short run. It's just about pragmatics. Is Oliver the Rosby ward? Now, this is the ward of Giles Rosby. Now, this is one of those curious things that happens all off camera, so we don't really know about it. Lord Rosby did not have children, and then he died, and then his ward, his foster, effectively takes control. And Cersei's all for, like, okay, well, let's just go and grab this for the crown. We'll take all the money and the crown can have it. But there's a bit of sort of contentious discussions within the small council, and they're not really sure what to do about it, and decide it's not really a very high priority. But it appears that this unnamed ward has now taken control, and because he is the closest sort of relative, has basically claimed that he is now Lord Rosby. Now, who might this be? Well, there's a possibility that this is Oliver Frey. Oliver Frey was related to the Rosbys, and so that would be, if they did decide that what they were going to do was foster him out, that would make sense to send him there. But Cersei says that he's not, this ward is not a blood relative, and nobody disagrees with her, so I'm guessing not. Probably this is a nothing, just a thing that we do not know about. That then leaves open the question, where is Oliver? And I think maybe he'll just randomly appear somewhere. I think that's probably what it is. He's not a major character. George R. R. Martin has a lot of characters, but he's not a major character, so I don't think that we need to be worrying too much about it. It's possible that he's the Rosby Ward, but I think probably not. Shah, last question from my patrons. So now is a good time to drop more questions into the chat. I'll try and pick up as many of them as I can. Saying I'm going to do the obvious one just to round things off. How will the government of the Riverlands look like when all of A Song of Ice and Fire is said and done? Do you see any obvious ruler candidates for Harrenhal and the twins? Both are quite likely to lose their current ruler and ruling family. Okay, so this could, as I've been saying sort of in various ways, this could go lots of different ways, but I think Edmure Tully probably will survive, simply because I don't think anyone's going to allow him anywhere near a position of authority that could be in danger. So I think he probably will return to Riverrun, and the Tullys will still be in charge of Riverrun. And I think that Sansa will be the new powerful person who is influencing him and preventing him from actually ruling in his own stead. So I think that's probably what's going to happen there. I certainly think the Blackfish, if he survives, and I don't see why he shouldn't survive, then the twins is a good thing for that. I loved the idea of Bronn, incidentally, on the show, when Bronn got offered 2 castles. I loved the idea of him being given the twins. I don't think it's going to end up that way in the books. He's got a different character arc going on there. They basically kept him going in the show because Jerome Flynn was very charismatic and funny, and it was getting darker, and we were losing a lot of the humorous characters, so they needed somebody to just keep the humor level up. So that's why they sort of kept him going in it for a while, but he's got a much smaller role in the books now. So I think that would be where I'm reasonably certain about Riverrun. I think it's an educated guess. I could be wrong in terms of the Blackfish to the twins. The Harrenhal is the big uncertainty. What I wonder is whether this will just be left to effectively to the Weirwood network. I think that it's been and I don't know whether what to sort of say, left as a nature reserve might be as good a way as anything. There is a Weirwood tree there. There is perhaps as it's right next to the Isle of Faces, that this could just be kept as a sort of a monument as much as anything else. I don't think, given all of the problems with Harrenhal are about the fact it's just too big. It's just not manageable. You can't do it. If you turned it into a working castle that operates at full efficiency, then it would be easily the biggest and most powerful castle in the land. So either you have Bran, even when he becomes king if we say that the Iron Throne itself is gone and King's Landing itself is probably not going to be a very good state. Where might he set up his throne? It won't be on the island of the Isle of Faces, but maybe as close as he can get. Maybe he will be King Bran in Harrenhal. Maybe that is where this all ends up. I don't know. That, as I say, I'm reasonably certain on Edmure and Riverrun. It's an educated guess, but I could be wrong with Brynden Tully and the twins. King Bran at Harrenhal is pure tinfoil, but I like it. Okay, let's pick up on a few questions from the chat. Fully armed and operational Harrenhal, yes, absolutely. That would be Robin Blackwood. That would be an astonishing thing. Andrew Kay saying Lord of Highgarden and Master of Coin for Bronn was one of the low-key, most ridiculous choices on the show. Yeah, I would agree with that. I think they wanted him to get a reward, but they've got so few characters left, and they wanted that small council scene. Yeah, it didn't work for me either. Question trivia. So I think there's a trivia happens soon after this. I can never remember which channel it's on. If you put a link in the chat, then I will give that a quick shout out before I go. Just trying to see if I've got any more questions just to pick up on. I think that's probably it. Okay, so I will, in that case, I will say what I'm going to do next time is it's tomorrow, says Sasek for the trivia. So the next time I'm going to look, I think, at the Vale of Arryn. So that's the history there is fascinating because it's not, the Vale is just this thin strip of very lush land, but then you also have the Eyrie, which is an astonishing thing in and of itself. And you have a huge amount of part of it, which is mountainous and out of the control of the Lords. So it actually is an incredibly complex area that has got lots of different types of land and lots of different, they've got incredibly renowned knights in an area that is very mountainous, which is an astonishing thing. So that's what we'll be doing next time. If you are Citadel of Trivia is the name of the trivia. If you have a look for that, then that's coming up tomorrow. If you like these live streams and you'd like to watch some more of them, then our link will be appearing somewhere around here. If you'd like to either support the channel or get access to some things that I do just for my patrons, a few little extra benefits, then there's a link appearing somewhere around here. Okay, thanks everyone. Fantastic questions this time. Take care, and I shall see you again soon.